what I'm really excited to talk to you about is I see you have an interest in the hero's journey. That's something I'm,
Yes, yes,
yeah, that's
yes.
something I'm really fascinated with. I think we all have our own kind of versions of it going on in a way, and I'm
Right,
interested
right.
in your experience and whether you think there's some consistencies across the board given the hero's journey.
Yeah, I absolutely do. Are you familiar with something called the Mandelbrot set?
No, I'm not.
It's a very obscure mathematical formula, but it's a fractal. And a mathematical fractal is something that if you zoom in on it, the more you zoom in, the more you start seeing the patterns repeating themselves over and over and over again. And there's a lot of really uh, high tech videos on YouTube of Mandelbrot sets for like 20 minutes, just keeping zooming in over and over and over. And I think that's the hero's journey. And we can see the hero's journey in all these different areas of our lives, from just giving a speech at a Toastmasters club to the 5 years that you get a job after college. They all have that same structure.
That's really
It,
interesting to hear it. Well, to have it compared to like a mathematical formula.
I mean, that's the way I think of it, because the mathematical formula, it just creates the same patterns over and over and over. And these kind of fractal like structures exist throughout nature.
Mm.
Like if you look at the cardiovascular system, it starts out with these big veins and branch into smaller veins and branch into smaller veins. And no matter how much you zoom in, they have the same basic structure. And that's the same basic structure that you'll find in a tree or a plant.
So, so to tie it directly to the hero's journey, what does that look like?
Well, fundamentally, the hero's journey is in three basic stages. And if you want to understand the three basic stages, the best way is to take a look at the very first Star Wars movie. Because Joseph Campbell's the guy that discovered the monomyth, which later became known as the hero's journey. And George Lucas hired Joseph Campbell to help him take his basic idea and put it into the hero's journey structure. And so the three phases of the hero journey is the orphan stage, where the hero knows there's something better than what he's doing, but he's not quite confident enough to get it by himself. Then he's forced out of that into the wandering hero phase, where he's on some kind of path, but he's still kind of struggling. He's still kind of learning his skills. He's still making friends. And then he transitions into the warrior phase, where he knows there's a fight coming. He knows there's some obstacle, some huge battle coming. There's some kind of a monster he has to face. And these three things repeat over and over and over again. I mean, even in school, we go from kindergarten to elementary school to junior high school to high school, and then maybe college, and then to a career, and then to a family, and then to a marriage, and then a family. And everything has these three same phases over and over again, where we're kind of on a holding pattern, and then something forces us to level up, and then we're kind of out of our element until we figure out what's going on. Then we figure out the one big thing we need to do. Then we kind of level up again, and then the whole process just keeps repeating.
It's interesting to think of it in a repetitive context. I've always thought of it as like perhaps one long ongoing thing, but you're right in that it can take on that form in smaller events
Mm-hmm.
or time frames.
Yeah, yeah. I think the reason we are so intrigued, or so we resonate so much with the hero's journey, is because that was the story that I think was calibrated way back in the Stone Age when we were still hunter gatherers. I mean, we've been anatomically and physiologically correct humans for about 200,000 years, but we've only had these organized societies for maybe 5,000 years. And we've only had mass communication in the Industrial Revolution for about 200 or 300 years. We've had the internet for like 50 years, social media for like 20 years. So at our core, we're still these kind of hunter gatherers living in a kind of strange world. And if you kind of pace the structure of the hero's journey, it perfectly paces the structure of a person's life back in those days. When you're a young child, when the adults are going out hunting every day, that's the kind of orphan stage. And you kind of feel like you're an orphan because all the adults are out hunting, and sometimes they're gone for a couple of weeks. But then when you're old enough to hunt, you can't be a slacker anymore. You have to kind of start to produce something to be worth something. And you're forced onto the hunting path. You're forced to become a hunter. And for the first part of your life, you don't know how to hunt. You're on the wandering hero phase. Then you learn some skills, you learn some techniques, and then the transition comes when you've got enough skills as a hunter and you're closing in on a big herd of woolly mammoths or something, and you know there's a big fight coming, and that's when your juices get flowing. But every time you go on a hunt, it's the same kind of thing. I mean, if you imagine after a hunt, you take down a ginormous woolly mammoth, the whole tribe celebrates, you're kind of relaxed, you're in this kind of level up plateau for a while, but then you get hungry and you're forced to go hunting again. And then you're hunting, you're looking for the next kill, and you're on the wandering phase. Then you see another herd of woolly mammoths to go after. Then you're forced to get into that warrior hero phase. So that same cycle repeats over and over. And I think to help facilitate this kind of life way, because trying to kill a big elephant with tusks with a stick is probably not the easiest thing people can do. And so they kind of prepare young children for that life by telling them these hero's journey stories over and over and over again. And that's just the stories that we kind of respond to. And I think these randomly created stories evolved over time into what we like today. And if you study the structure of most best-selling fiction, most Hollywood blockbusters, they still have that hero's journey structure to them. And we still get motivated by those same stories, because every single day we're somewhere along the path, many paths at once, but there's always some kind of big fight that's coming, this thing that we need to do. It might be something small like talking to your boss. It might be something big like asking for your partner to marry you, but there's always some kind of battle coming up, so to speak, some big obstacle that we need to deal with. So we're always on some kind of hero's journey path. It could be a long one, like you said, or it could be something that lasts only maybe like an hour.
Yeah, it's perhaps that primitive aspect that resonates within us, trying to get back to
Yeah, right.
a more primitive thing that we seem to have, like you say, since the last 5,000 years or whatever, seem to have moved away from a little
Hmm.
bit.
Right.
Just randomly, I just recently watched, not to promote a series or anything like that, but I watched Alone, where they throw people have to survive in a really out in the Arctic, basically, for 100 days.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
didn't realize, I do appreciate those shows if there's like actually some real survival or skills involved. And, the people, I
Hmm.
don't know if you've seen it, but the people going
Yeah.
in,
I've watched a few of those shows.
yeah. So I was just fascinated by what we're talking about, these people going back to a very primitive uh, way of living, and watching them go through this process of well, being alone, but living off a barren land,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then seeing, suddenly they start getting memories of things from their past coming through, and they seem in amidst this survival process, there seemed to be a lot of like clarity coming through and stuff. But then they were
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
they were also going a little bit bonkers at the same time
Yeah.
without like
Right. Right.
human
Right. Right.
interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of good lessons to learn from that show. One of the lessons I think is that it's really, really, really hard to go it alone. It's almost impossible to do it by yourself. I
Mm,
mean, we are social animals, we are social creatures. The worst thing you can do to somebody is put them in solitary confinement. So it's really, really hard to survive on your own, even in a regular life, not even thinking about the wilderness. But there's also, like you said, there's when you're by yourself, you start to really think about your life and you really start to evaluate what's really important. There's always that kind of transition where they all start off, they all think they're going to get the prize, they all think they're going to have the best skills, get the prize, but then halfway through, when it really starts to get difficult, they really evaluate, is the prize really what I want, or is it my life back home with my family and my kids? Is that the most important thing that I just kind of maybe forgot about?
mm. That was consistent, actually. They started to realize what was important the longer it went on, and when they made that decision to leave. Um, yeah, you've also got experience in hypnosis. Um, that's not something I've ever dabbled in, or can you share a bit about that? What's your experience with that, and how effective is it in bringing about like change or shifts within people?
Well, first of all, there are a few different kinds of hypnosis. Hypnosis is really kind of a mental state, and there's a lot of ways to create that mental state. Probably the most famous kind of hypnosis is stage hypnosis, where you get people up on stage and you get them doing crazy things, and that involves a lot of different variables, and it's really not so much the actual hypnotist saying these magic words, that will make people do these crazy things. It's a whole kind of scenario, the whole environment, all the variables. Then there's like highway hypnosis, which is when you're kind of in a trance by yourself because you're on the road and you're driving and your body, your mind realizes you're going to a familiar place. So it kind of shuts down just a little bit so to save energy. Then there's movie hypnosis or fiction hypnosis, where you sit down in the theater, the lights go out, and you forget all the stuff that's going on outside, and you just kind of pay close attention. And there's not even really an agreed upon definition of what hypnosis is, other than a kind of a heightened sense of internal awareness at the extent of everything going on. But the kind of hypnosis that I specialize in is what's called covert or conversational or technically Ericksonian hypnosis. And it's based a lot on storytelling. And it's kind of very similar to the hero's journey in a way, because one way to think of the hero's journey story, if you imagine it being told, a bunch of hero journey stories being told to a bunch of kids growing up, is a very long post hypnotic suggestion implantation system. I mean, if you could imagine a group of kids who were never told these stories growing up, the first time they grew up and had to face a woolly mammoth with a stick, it would be terrifying. But if you tell a bunch of these hero journey stories as they're growing up, it can be thought of as convincing them that when they see the woolly mammoth, they won't be afraid, they'll be confident. And that's kind of the thing people want to do when they undergo hypnosis. Like if you're a guy and you want to talk to girls, but you're too afraid, you go see a hypnotist. He tells you a bunch of hypnotic stories. And so the post hypnotic suggestion is when you see an attractive girl, you won't feel nervous or scared. You'll feel excited and happy. It's just kind of a shift. And that happens through storytelling. And this was essentially invented by one guy named Dr. Milton Erickson, who was a therapist and a doctor back in the 40s and the 50s. And he essentially invented a new kind of a therapeutic way to help people by telling these stories. And he would take their problem state and he would tell them stories that would kind of offer the solution state, but he would tell these very, very convoluted, very hard to follow stories. And so what would happen is the patient would come in and say, Doc, I got this problem. And he would say, well, tell me what the problem is. And they would tell him the problem. And he would say, that reminds me of a story. And he would start telling these stories, these very, very convoluted stories. He would start one story and then start another story and then finish the story a little bit and then start another story over here. Just like how they have like really, really well-written dramas. There's always these storylines going on, but he would tell them in a very purposely confusing way. So by the time the session was over, the patient would be just absolutely, what the heck just happened? But they would go home and they would discover a couple weeks later that their problem had just vanished. And so he would use these convoluted, confusing, purposely vague, specifically vague storytelling techniques to kind of put all the raw ingredients of the solution to their problem inside their head. And they would go home, and because they were so confused, they would be trying to piece together, and they would kind of subconsciously almost put together their own custom built solution to their own problems. And so he would very, very cleverly slide the solutions to their problems inside their own brains so they could later go home and discover them on their own and take ownership of the solutions to their problems. So it would like stick more effectively.
It'd be like reinforced because they've
exactly.
worked the cogs themselves. Yeah, that's a fascinating approach. You know, to have a almost confusing, but ultimately that helps.
Yeah.
So is that similar to what we're talking about in terms of a technique for, call it, persuasion? And what's the kind of difference to you between persuasion and like manipulation?
Well, I would say the main difference between persuasion and manipulation is persuasion is always a mutual benefit, where manipulation is kind of a zero sum, where you get benefited, but they kind of get screwed. That's probably the easiest way to describe it.
And
I mean, you can persuade somebody and totally get your own interest. If you look at someone and think, if I can persuade them to do this, I'm going to benefit. That's perfectly okay, so long as you make sure that they also benefit and that they benefit in a way that they decide, not you decide. It's a common trap to fall into, to say, I want to persuade somebody and I'm going to make them do something for me and they're going to get something as a response, so I don't have to feel guilty. But that thing they're going to get is something that I decide is valuable, not them. So it's critical to understand that when you persuade people, the benefit they're getting is the benefit that they get to define the value of, not the person doing the persuading. So long as you keep that in mind, you can always be very, very ethical with your persuasion.
Ethical is the word. Yeah, like a transparent, ethical, honest. I just persuasion almost feels a little bit like loaded in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
there's an interesting parallel between the idea of torture, meaning that when a human is being tortured, their brain will just go into a very, very dark place, and they'll do anything, they'll say anything to end the torture, which is why torture never really works as far as getting useful information. And if you think of the same structure of a very, very charismatic buy car salesman, it's kind of the same structure, because this poor petrified customer is sitting there getting hammered by this super charismatic closer, and they start to convince themselves to buy the product just to get away from the charismatic salesperson. And then they go home imagining that it was their idea to buy the product. So whether that's ethical or not is kind of a gray area, but that's how a lot of persuasion happens. We're persuaded by being hammered by all these messages, most of which come in outside of our conscious awareness, and we kind of are forced against our will to make the decision on our own to do whatever the persuader is wanting us to do. And so it's a very, very kind of gray area between ethical persuasion, somewhat ethical persuasion, and outright manipulation.
yeah, it's a gray area. I think of when you're walking down the street and somebody's like promoting a charity. I mean, essentially they're trying to do a good thing. And then, they do the, hey, I like your shoes.
Right.
And I know I'm like, you don't like my shoes, right? You're just trying to reel me in with the fishing rod.
Right.
And I get it.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of like, it's a bit of a deterrent, because I'm always up for somebody approaching me if they're just straight up about what they're trying. I'll always listen, if it's in a straight up, honest way. I think when people feel like they've been hoodwinked, nobody grooves with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the biggest anti-motivators, is to create a feeling of being conned or cheated.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the guy doing the charity. One of a very dangerous idea, in my opinion, is when you're getting people to do things, if you decide it's for a good cause, if you decide that your cause is righteous, that can kind of open the door to the ends justifying the means, which means they can feel okay giving fake compliments to people, or preying on people's kind of soft spot to get them to give money to the charity or whatever.
Right. I get it. Yeah. Because they've justified it's a justified strategy, call
Yeah.
it.
One of the biggest disasters in American corporate land that happened way back in the day was when Coca-Cola changed their formula to New Coke. This was back, I think, in the 80s maybe, but it was a huge disaster because all of the consumers that were used to the regular Coke formula, they felt absolutely betrayed. And they were so angry at Coke for what felt like being cheated by switching their favorite brand, and they almost went out of business because of that. So that's very dangerous when you do something where someone's going to end up feeling cheated or betrayed. That's something that's really, really hard to come back from if you're going to use that type of persuasion. That's why snake oil salesmen would always sell snake oil off the back of their wagon. They would roll into a new town and they would pitch, sell all their snake oil, but they would have to leave before people realized it was a scam, because otherwise they'd be destroyed or tarred and feathered.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, you've written multiple books. I'm interested in your do you have a very structured writing process?
Yes, absolutely. I do. A long, long time ago, when I decided to write my first novel, I didn't know what I was doing. I just figured I would just write every day when I had a chance. And it took me about a year to get the novel out, and then maybe another 6 months to edit it and put it all in order and everything. But then I heard a piece of advice, or I read a piece of advice. I don't remember where, but the advice was to don't think about writing a certain number of words per day. Instead, think about writing for a certain time per day,
Mm.
and at the same time every day. And so I started doing that. When I did that, my productivity just exploded. This was when I was teaching English in Japan and Asia, and I would get up a couple of hours before, earlier than I normally would, and just set the timer for 2 hours. And I would just write consistently for 2 hours every day. And once I'd established that habit, it was just a matter of going through time. And every couple, 3 weeks, I would have enough material for another book. And then I
It's
would
almost
spend a couple of days in between trying to think about the next book, and I would game out the structure and the ideas, and then I would just write the next book. And I would found that writing books, writing nonfiction, was a fantastic kind of learning process. And I recommend that everybody spend some time writing every single day, because it's a great way to get all the ideas that are bouncing around in your head, but you're kind of forcing yourself to put them out in a logical, kind of structured way. And when you actually see them, you're like, oh, wow, I never realized this idea matched with this idea, and this can lead to this. This is a thing. You feel like you're discovering all this cool stuff that's already inside your head.
yeah. I think that word count can be a little bit ominous. As
Yes,
you say,
yes.
going for a time frame is much more. It's don't be too hard on yourself. It's sort of like, like you say, consistency, habitually devote that block of time without the pressure of I need to hit words. It's about
Right,
it's about
right.
the focused block of time. I can yeah, I get that. How do you keep sort of the self-critic at bay when you're doing that, like in an initial draft?
Well, I think it's just brute force writing that just keeps them in the bay. If you the slower I write, the more that critic can pop up. But if I just write as fast as I can, and give that critic not even a chance to understand what I'm saying, it just. And I think I've always had this kind of anti-authority attitude, anti-critique attitude. It got me into a lot of trouble in high school, but it's just that kind of, I'll write what I would like, and if they don't like it, that's not my problem. That's their problem, kind of thing.
Yeah, you're never going to please everyone, right? And
But
it's
the
kind
more you think about what your content, if you're creating any kind of content, the more you think about it, then the more, at least for me, I mean, some people are different. The more you think about it, the more you'll start to question yourself. And this is a kind of a whole kind of argument over whatever content you're creating. Like for me personally, I just like to produce content every single day as a habit, and on a broader scale, I think for general self improvement, general production, the best thing you can do is create a daily habit and just stick to that no matter what.
Yeah, definitely. Um, what's your experience with having that sort of uh, independent kind of anti-critique thing? What's been your experience with publishing, self-publishing, hybrid publishing, um, main publishing?
Well, that actually has actually served me very well. I know that a lot of people write books for Kindle, and there's all kinds of scary statistics that show that most self-published authors make like maybe $200-300 per year. And I've just been lucky because when I started writing, I already had a sizable email list that I've been growing for a while. And so I had a kind of a captured market to sell my stuff to.
Mm.
And so I was lucky enough to make enough income to just keep it going. But my very first novel that I wrote, this was before Kindle came out, and I spent a lot of money to self-publish that, and I didn't sell anything. And that was a tough experience because I had these dreams. I'm going to write this first novel. I'm going to be a best-selling novelist. I'm going to be famous. And I wrote the novel. I had to pay a couple thousand to get it published, and I sold like 5 copies, and that was like almost devastating. But with Kindle and the ability to kind of create your own market by having a website that collects visitors, that collects emails, and just kind of have this kind of whole process. I guess it would be different if I didn't have my own website, if I didn't have my own kind of customer base, and I was just writing novels or writing books and putting them on Kindle and hoping for the best. That would probably be a lot more discouraging.
Yeah, so you've just continued to self-publish all the way through
Yeah, yeah,
having that platform.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. Um, what are your thoughts on? Well, we've kind of like you've said, habits are so important. How do they self-sabotage is a different thing, and
Yes, yes.
self-sabotage. I'm not sure if that comes into play in the hero's journey at all. It's a different kind of beast, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I think the core reason for self-sabotage is when you feel push into some kind of area where you're above your kind of pay grade, so to speak. And
Sort of
it's close.
an imposter thing.
It's closely. I was just going to say that it's closely related to the imposter syndrome. And the hero's journey is kind of a story that presupposes that the hero has a lot of people together. They're in the same group. And this goes back to the Alone TV show, people being alone versus people being in groups. And the hero's journey presupposes that the hero has a lot of people he's working with that are helping him become the hero. And when he becomes the hero, he's also protecting them. So there's a lot of interplay between the individual and the group. But self-sabotage, I think, is a time when we feel maybe exposed and by ourselves without a lot of support systems. And we start to feel like we're kind of too far ahead of our pay grade. We start to feel like people are going to find out that we don't belong. And that won't happen in the hero's journey, because traditionally, from the hunter-gatherer standpoint, we were always around people we'd known our whole lives, and they knew us intimately, far more than we know each other today. And so self-sabotage is usually when someone is successful suddenly more than they expected, and they're surrounded by people that they don't know very well. And so there's this fear that I'm going to be found out for being an imposter, and that makes you make mistakes to hopefully escape from it's almost like you're going to punish yourself before they get a chance to.
Mm. Yeah, it's a different.
And that's definitely a function of our modern world, the self-sabotage.
Yeah, the impact of technology and everything, and the whole AI and technology and social media, and there's a whole lot of it's obviously many different branches there, but it's it's concerning in a lot of ways. It's also beneficial in a lot of ways. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword. I mean,
Double-edged.
technology has always been like this. What I think one of the watershed moments in American history is the first televised debate between Kennedy and Nixon. Because the people who listened to it on the radio, they thought that Nixon won because he sounded more presidential. He sounded more like an experienced statement. But the people that watched it on TV thought Kennedy won because he looked better. And for the first time in American history, we chose our president based on how they looked on TV.
Mm.
So the benefits of TV are cool because we can watch cool TV shows and look at news and stuff, but it also kind of dumbed down the entire population like that.
In an instant. Yeah, I had heard that actually. The difference between seeing it or listening to it. It's a crazy difference.
Yeah, because if you're listening to it on the radio, you're forced to think of the ideas, what the ideas mean, what the intelligence of the speaker is, the articulation of the speaker. But when you see it on TV, it's almost like you immediately lose 20 IQ points or something.
Mm.
And another study shows that since the 50s, right around when TV became popular, the average grade point or grade level of the American State of the Union has been steadily decreasing. And this is certainly not helped along by social media. I mean, if you could imagine just 50, 60, 70 years ago, when a political leader would give a speech on the radio, they would have to make sure it was carefully calculated. They would practice it. But today, everybody tries to outdo each other through tweets, it's ridiculous how dumbed down society has become because of technology.
Yeah, and it's hard to know where it's all going to go, really. Like where does it end up?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can't really go any worse. I mean, there's not much more there. I mean, you can only shrink our attention span so much before it gets down to the atomic level of the unsplittable attention span.
I do. Yeah, I just made a short film actually, and it's really short, but the idea within the 3 minutes was to actually give some space, to push back against this micro. So I literally have the actor trimming a bonsai tree for quite a while in terms of and I did that intentionally to push back against this micro attention span we have, which and I'm not saying I'm, I do the flick through as well, my brain's, I'm trying to manage this stuff, but yeah, you're right in that how much smaller can it get? And I always hope that maybe we'll sort of retreat, going full circle in a way, and try and get back to a more primitive balance of, try and bring that in a bit more, kind of retreat. But I don't know if it's going that way.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot of interest that's pushing that way. I just saw yesterday that I think like 20 or 30 US states have filed a lawsuit against Facebook because it's addictive. And so there's definitely a lot of people that realize social media is a problem. It's whether or not we can pull ourselves away from it, though.
Mm.
I mean, I guess the tobacco companies had to put that smoking causes cancer, and people still smoke though. But that was kind of due to a public shaming thing. So it was a kind of a different structure when they had that whole campaign against smoking. But social media is so everywhere, and everyone benefits somewhat from social media. And everybody has this idea that I use social media, but it's not a problem. It's kind of like everyone's addicted to heroin or something, and they all think that they can handle it anytime. They can quit anytime. Just let me get another shot of heroin first before I quit.
The classic is cookies as well. Like, imagine they were real cookies. You get pages of this agreement stuff, and none of us take. I don't think. How many of us take the time to read? Because you're trying to do something urgently or whatever, and then you just accept these crazy long agreements without even looking at them. It's like, it's the Wild West. Like, it's really the unregulated Wild West. But that's the whole thing. It's a tradition on the show to have guests, given your experience and your journey, suggest some sort of challenge for listeners. Does anything spring to mind? We're not talking like jumping out of a plane.
I challenge you to go down to the zoo and jump into the tiger cage. No. And say hey to the tiger.
that could
Well, jumping off of our complaints about social media, I challenge you, dear viewer, to go out into the world today and say hi to 5 strangers. And if you can, start a conversation. And I challenge you, dear viewer, to make it a habit to start a conversation with one stranger every day, whatever topic, for the rest of your life. That's what I challenge you to do.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good one. And there's a level of, even more so in this day and age, there's a level of discomfort in doing that. But it's that connection would be so rewarding.
We are absolutely social animals. We are driven by instincts, and when we obey our instincts that help our lives, it feels good. Eating feels good. Having sex feels good. Being social with people feels good. So if you just force yourself at first to get out and say hi to people every day, to start a conversation, you will remember how good it feels to have a conversation with strangers in a friendly, non-threatening, I don't want any outcome kind of way. And that will kind of hopefully build on itself, so you can realize that there's a whole world out there outside of social media filled with happy people, filled with people that have treasure inside. Everybody you meet has some kind of fantastic story inside about something they've done or something they want. And all you have to do is go out and talk to people to be a treasure hunter of the human spirit. And that is accessible everywhere to everybody. And it doesn't cost a thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. Couldn't agree more. What's coming up for you in terms of projects? Are you writing at the moment, and where can people find you?
Right now, I'm in a transition period. I've been producing products and books for the past several years, and I made a decision at the beginning of this past summer to transition from producing stuff and just kind of letting it be purchased by my passively growing list to actively promoting myself. And so I'm actively promoting myself. I'm doing podcasts. I'm looking into advertise. I've never advertised my book on Kindle before, so I'm going to be advertising them. But if you want to get in touch with all the stuff that I've created, look up mindpersuasion.com/start. That's got a list of all the stuff, all of our courses, all of our books, our YouTube channel, everything you can find out about mind persuasion. We got tons of stuff to help you become a better communicator and help you more effectively live your hero's journey life.
Cool.
And achieve your maximum ambition possible.
Yeah, nice to bring it back to the hero's journey to finish. So no, I really appreciate your time. We'll perhaps do it again sometime, because there's a lot to cover. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for having me, Daniel.